Have you ever wondered how a single idea, a single voice, can grow to become a massive global force? Well, we're going to explore that very question by looking at two incredibly different histories of expansion. One is all tied up with empires, and the other? It's all about a single founder's journey. So, let's start with the big question right at the heart of all this. How does an idea actually change the world? It's not just about how powerful the message is. It's about how that message travels, how it bumps up against different cultures, and how it eventually manages to take root. And we're going to compare two really, really different paths here. On one side, you've got the spread of Christianity, a huge, sprawling process that took centuries and got all tangled up with empires and state power. And then on the other side, you have the founding of Sikhism, which was this deeply personal journey literally led by its founder on foot, all based on talking to people and building communities from scratch. Okay, so let's go right back to the beginning. The founder's original message. What was that core idea, that call to action, that really set everything in motion? For Christianity, the mission was baked in right from the start. The Great Commission here, it's a direct command. It says, go out, travel to every single nation, and spread the message. This gives the faith a kind of universal, expansionist logic from its absolute inception. Now, Sikhism's founding message is something else entirely. It's not a command to go out and expand, but this really profound statement about unity. Guru Nanak's root mantra is calling on people not to convert others, but to realize a universal truth for themselves, that there is one God, a creator who exists way beyond the religious labels of the time. So, you've got these two very different starting points, right? These two very different calls to action. So now, let's see how they led to two vastly different journeys of expansion. What's really wild when you look at this is just the sheer scale of time we're talking about. The spread of Christianity wasn't some single event. No way. It began as this organic, grassroots movement, but then it got intertwined with state power. Kings started using it to consolidate their rule. And then finally, it was carried across the entire globe on the back of colonialism. And this slide really breaks down the complex and sometimes contradictory methods they used. It was a mix of everything. You had peaceful missionaries doing their work and people converting voluntarily. But happening right alongside that, you had intense political pressure from rulers and, sometimes even brutal military force. A famous example is Charlemagne, who, after putting down a Saxon rebellion, basically offered the prisoners a choice: baptism or death. Guru Nanak's approach couldn't have been more different. It was pretty much the polar opposite of coercion. His entire method was built on three main pillars. First, traveling far and wide for open dialogue. Second, composing these beautiful hymns to share his insights. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, building institutions. Things like the Sangats, the congregation, and the Langar, a free communal kitchen, were designed to put his ideas about equality into practice every single day. And I mean, his travels were epic. We're talking thousands of miles. He didn't go to conquer places. He went to discuss ideas. There's this incredible story from his visit to Mecca, the holiest site in Islam. An official got angry with him for pointing his feet toward the holy shrine. And Guru Nanak's response was just perfect. He said, "Turn my feet to a place where God is not." The point was so clear. God is everywhere, not just locked up in one direction or one holy place. So, a huge part of this story is how these faiths deal with the cultures they run into. Do they adapt? Do they confront? This is where you can really see their core philosophies play out in the real world. One of the key Christian strategies was something called accommodation. So instead of trying to just wipe out the local culture, missionaries would adapt. A fantastic example of this is Pope Gregory's advice to his missionaries in England. He basically said, look, don't destroy the pagan temples. Just purify them with holy water, build some altars, and turn them into churches. Let the people keep worshiping in the places they're already used to. But there was also a much more confrontational approach: desacralization. And this was pretty intense. It involved deliberately defacing or even mutilating pagan statues, chopping off heads or hands, to prove that these old gods were powerless. The idea was to physically break the spiritual hold of the old beliefs by showing they couldn't even protect their own images. Guru Nanak's approach was something else entirely. It wasn't about accommodation or confrontation. It was about synthesis. He engaged with these deep spiritual ideas from both Hinduism and Islam, which were the big dominant faiths of his region, and he wove them together to create a universal message that rose above all their conflicts and their divisions. And this was a revolutionary thing to say at the time. After his profound spiritual awakening, the very first thing he said publicly wasn't that he had a better version of some other faith. It was that he was on a new path altogether. That's what set his teachings apart. It wasn't a reform of Hinduism or Islam, but a totally distinct spiritual path that was all about unifying people.
All right, so after all this time, after centuries have passed, what are the lasting legacies of these two completely different ways of spreading an idea?
Well, you can see the results pretty clearly. On one side, Christianity's path led it to become the world's largest and most diverse religion, but it carries with it this complex and often difficult legacy tied to empire and power. On the other side, Sikhism's founder-led journey created a distinct global community where social equality and service are just embedded in its DNA. And get this number right here brilliantly illustrates Christianity's modern story. Because while its link to colonialism is a huge part of its history, its most dramatic growth is actually happening now in the post-colonial world. Just look at Africa. The number of Christians there exploded from only about 9 million in 1900 to nearly 400 million by 2005. That is just staggering.
For Sikhism, the legacy is just as powerful, but in a different way. The langar, that communal kitchen that Guru Nanak established all those centuries ago, isn't just a tradition. It's the living, breathing embodiment of his message. To this day, in Sikh temples, gurdwaras, all over the world, every single person sits on the floor together and shares the exact same food, no matter their wealth, their status, or their faith. It's a direct echo of its founder's journey.
So at the end of the day, what these two histories really show us is that how an idea spreads is just as important as the idea itself. It fundamentally shapes what that belief becomes over time, and it leaves us with a really important question to think about. What is the relationship between faith, power, and culture in our own world today?